So welcome everyone. I am grateful that you're here today and grateful for whomever supports you so that you could take time to be part of this sacred circle today. So my name is Phoenix Smith and I am the founder of the Alliance for Ecotherapy and Social Justice. But even more than that, I am a friend of Louise Dunlap. Louise Dunlap and I have been friends for several years. We met at a meditation retreat in the Santa Cruz Mountains some years ago, and we were both walking uphill to the temple, and I just slowed down so that I could walk next to her, and that was the best thing that I did, was to slow down and walk next to Louise, and we've been able to build a friendship over the years, and so I'm very honored and grateful for her friendship and for the learning and sharing that we do with each other. So this is not just going to be a webinar or just a book talk, talking about her book. So I am not only an ecotherapist and kind of my Western careers in public health ecotherapy, but I've been initiated in the Yoruba African tradition for 14 years. I had my anniversary a couple weeks ago, 14 years. And so I am a religious person. And what I have been taught by my elders and on my spiritual journey of healing and working with my own ancestors and connecting to the earth and being invited into various indigenous ceremonies and my own ceremonies that I hold and with my elders, is that whenever we talk about genocide or slavery, colonization, it's important that we ground it in sacred ceremony. This is not just a Zoom webinar. So we are doing our best here today to create the container for sacred ceremony today. We are all here. You can imagine that we're here wherever you are. We're sitting in a circle. And the way that we are going to start today is through prayer. I will say a prayer, and then Louise will lead us in a meditation and embodied land acknowledgement. And then we will ask the community, we'll put up a slide that's called Brave Space, a poem called Brave Space. And I will ask members of the community here to read off lines of the Brave Space, make this more interactive. And then we are going to put you in breakout rooms for like 3 minutes to greet your virtual neighbor. So if we were in person, we would say, turn to your neighbor. You know, I did grow up in the Black Methodist Church, and we would say, turn to your neighbor and say, God loves you. So in the virtual space and ceremony that we're doing here today, we're going to put you in the breakout rooms for like 3 minutes, just so you can greet the people that are in the space here with you. And then we will come back and then we will get into the dialogue. And we also ask that if you have questions that you don't use the chat, we're going to ask that you come on camera, show your face, and unmute yourself and ask your question, right? So this is not just maybe the million Zoom meetings that many of us have been on the past 2.5 years. It's important that we look at each other and show each other space. This is not an easy dialogue or conversation. I have never in my 54 years had this kind of conversation with a white person. This is new for me too. At this level, at the healing level, right? I've had arguments with white people. I've had debates with white people, right? But I haven't had this kind of a sacred conversation where Louise shares her very personal journey with another white person, right? So we ask that we all practice cultural humility, and that none of us are experts on anyone's culture. I cannot speak for all African-American people. And so we're asking that we all practice humility here. So my name is Phoenix. My pronouns are she, they. I live on the lands of the Piscataway people. in the Washington, D.C., Maryland area. I've been here for 8, 9, 10 months, 8, 9 months. But I recently moved here from the East Bay, Oakland, on the land of the Lisjan Ohlone people, where I learned a lot. And so Segorite is a woman-led, indigenous woman-led, not just land trust, but community that is teaching us a lot. And so one of the things that they say is that they call on us all to heal and transform the legacies of colonization, genocide, and patriarchy, and to do the work our ancestors and future generations are calling us to do. This dialogue is part of that work. The work that Louise has done for many, many years is that work. So just by you being here today, you are starting to do that work or continuing that work. So I invite you to think about it as an invitation, right? An invitation to be able to heal and transform the legacies that are from colonization and genocide and patriarchy and slavery that are doing much harm to the land and to the waters and to the birds and to the animals and to the trees and to us as humans. So before we begin, there's this beautiful Brave Space poem by Mickey Scott Bay Jones. Maybe you're familiar with it. And I'm going to ask members of the community to read the poem out loud. So if you can volunteer, just jump off mute and read one line, and then another person read the next line until it's read. So who's going to start? Louise.
Together we will create brave space.
Because there is no such thing as a safe space.
We exist in the real world.
We all carry scars, and we all have caused wounds.
In this space,
we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world.
We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere.
we call each other to more truth and love.
We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow.
We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know.
We will not be perfect.
This space will not be perfect.
It will not always be what we wish it to be.
But
it will be our brave space together.
And we will work on it side by side.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. The way that I've been taught in my tradition is that whenever we talk about genocide and colonization in this way, that we need to start with prayer and make it a sacred space. So this is ceremonial protocols. If you've ever been to ceremony, indigenous ceremony, African ceremony, there are protocols that guide our behavior. And so I'm asking that you please adhere to these few protocols here. And so one is that humility, the root of the word means from the earth. So if we all can just be from the earth today and practice humility, practice cultural humility, knowing that none of us is an expert in any of this. We ask that please remember to mute yourself because we're doing virtual ceremony. We're not talking. We ask that if you can, we understand some people are at work or maybe the camera isn't working properly, but if you are able to, if you want to ask a question or speak, we ask that you please put your camera on so we can see your lovely face. We ask that you please also speak from the I, right? And we, most importantly, some of the things that may be shared and talked about from Louise in her book may activate you in various ways. You may feel sadness, you may feel guilt, you may feel anger, you may feel shame, you may feel joy and love. And so I'm going to ask that you take care of yourself and just center and ground yourself in your own breath, right? So as those things come up for you, just breathe, steady yourself and ground yourself. And we all need to steady and ground ourselves every day, especially in these times that we're living in. So I just would ask people if you could just say a thumbs up if you can follow these ceremonial protocols. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. And so we're going to start now with prayer. And then after I say a prayer, then Louise is going to lead us in a brief meditation and grounding. I pour libations. Tutu omi, tutu ona, tutu le, tutu ache, tutu la roye, tutu engungun. Kosi ku, kosi ano, kosi iyo, kosi ofo, kosi idina, kosi akombo, kosi titibo, ariku babawa. Mo yubo lo dumari, mo yubo lofi, mo yubo lo run, mo yubi leo gere, mo yubo bobegun and belesa wo dumari olura run. So when I poured water on the earth, I asked for the earth to cool the earth, to cool the people here, to cool our tongues, to cool our heads. I ask for blessings from the sun and the moon and the stars. I ask for blessings from the earth. I ask for blessings from the ancestors. I ask for blessings from the creator and all of her and his and their different manifestations. We give thanks for this day. We give thanks for all that is sacred. We give thanks for the mountains and the rivers and the waters and the birds and the trees and the air. We give thanks for our ancestors. We give thanks for the ceremonies. We give thanks for all of our teachers that we have encountered on the path. We give thanks for our health. We give thanks for our family. We give thanks for each other. We ask the Creator to please be with us today as we enter into the space of dialogue and healing with Louise Dunlap around her very powerful book, Inherited Silence, Listening to the Land, Healing Colonizer Mind. We pray for Louise that she has strength, continues to have strength and courage, and we pray for her health as she goes around virtually to speak about things that are not easy to speak about. We ask that you hold her with tenderness and with love and care. And we pray for all Indigenous people everywhere around the world. We pray for their health and their well-being. We give thanks for the generosity of spirit, the generosity of knowledge, the generosity of healing practices that all Indigenous people have given to us. We give thanks, we give thanks, we give thanks. Ashe.
I would ask that we, if you are comfortable closing your eyes and feeling with your body what you can feel of the earth, I would ask that you breathe with me for a few moments, and I will share some meditation in the style of my practice, which is the Buddhist practice of Thich Nhat Hanh, Vietnamese teacher, who many of you know. So let's just first take a few breaths on our own, feeling ourselves grounding, feeling the body give its weight to the earth, feeling the earth respond with gratitude. And then, if you are indoors, for your next breath, send this connection, this energy, to the outdoor space around you. Imagine your feet on the actual earth. In this present time. Again, breathing, quieting your body and mind. And now, once again, imagining those feet of yours touching into this earth 500 years into the past. Note the trees that are around you, the waters, the deep-rooted grasses. Feel the energy of this earth. For a couple more breaths. And then acknowledge the other human beings that may be on this land, caregivers to the land for many, many, many centuries. We'll be returning now, but before you leave, to come back to the space of the now. Do find some gesture in your heart to thank these land ancestors. And maybe to hear what they would like you to do in the present time. So slowly, slowly bringing your awareness back to the starting place and taking several more deep breaths of gratitude. And thank you for allowing me to try something that I've been yearning to try. We have done so many land acknowledgements many of us over the last few years. And sometimes they feel a little bit formulaic, coming from standard practices. And I'm just reaching out to try to feel the land, feel the people, and be able to to move towards reparative actions that go with the acknowledgement. So thank you for letting me share that. It's new. It's totally new.
We're in the moment here for letting spirit flow. Thank you so much, Louise. Thank you. So, that was very nice. Very nice. So I want to move into the dialogue now. And Louise Dunlap is 12th generation of European descent on Turtle Island and 6th generation Californian. She was born and lives now on the unceded land of the Liston Ohlone. After studying botany and medieval English literature and teaching and writing in urban and environmental planning, looks like something was cut off here, but I'll continue. She's worked with writers in social justice groups. I was a student in one of her writing groups, and she authored a book, Undoing the Silence, that was about this work, and began journeys into the hidden history of white supremacy that would lead to a second book. So, Louise, this book for me was and is not an easy book to read or to digest. I found myself stopping in parts and having to stop and take a deep breath around the realities of the violence and the grief around the harsh realities of genocide of the Native peoples there were on those lands, because we know it's not past, it's still present. And so, however, in a book that digs into the story of genocide and enslavement, I found it comforting in a sense on how you also weaved in your deep connections to the natural world. Can you tell us why you wanted to look at both themes in this book and what you learned from doing so?
Well, Phoenix, thank you for that question. And especially, it's a little hard to start out with just the acknowledgement of the pain of this book. But I can see a few people's faces on the screen who I know have read the book. And believe me, I'm getting a lot of emails from the people that are reading it saying, this book is really hard. It's one person said today, it's tearing me up. And I wasn't sure if she meant tears or tearing me up. It really is hard. And believe me, it was very hard to write for that reason. I'm just can I take a little time to get to the point of your question? I wrote the book because two reasons. I loved this piece of land that it had been a part of my life since it's 84 years now, a long time, but of my family's life for 5 generations before that. And I wanted to honor the land with looking at its history, but I also knew that my ancestors had been part of what I hadn't learned the details of it, but I knew it was violent and I knew I didn't want to look at it. And yet I had to get the history of the humans and the land. So I had to look into all kinds of old books and get some really terrible things, much worse than I had imagined about the Napa Valley. People in the Napa Valley don't know this story either. Big, and they're all up in turmoil about it. We had a reading there last week, and I got the same feedback there. The history not only was it not told in full in our schooling, but no one talked about it. No one wanted to talk about it. It's too painful. But it's out there, and yeah. So my main answer to your question is I needed the sense of belonging and holding and love that I've always gotten from the earth in order to keep myself working on this. I think there's maybe one person on this call that has seen a lot of me during the time I'm talking about, mostly on Zoom, and knows that I went through many periods of discouragement, feeling, it's this way for me just about climate change, not to mention the genocide on the continent. But it's very easy to know that my ancestors were responsible, that I'm a recipient of the benefits of this. And if you don't have a lot of spiritual practice, you're either going to just turn away from it, or you're going to use those spiritual practices to heal something. Turning away from it was what my ancestors did. Because you can't tell me that they didn't know that people were being killed. That they didn't know that in one chapter I figure out that back east, when they were living on the East Coast, there were 6 generations that went to war in the colonial wars. 6 generations. And they knew the memes in those days were about destroying the enemy. Extermination was a word that was used. So they knew, they had to know what they were doing. And it's so easy to feel guilt, what in Buddhism is called unwholesome regret. Unwholesome regret, the kind of regret that makes you unable to function, to move forward. It's just awful. And I felt that often during the time I was writing it. And now at the moment, I can evoke it very easily. So I don't want to bring it on you. But I want to say that there are I think probably all spiritual practices have approaches for dealing with guilt and unwholesome regret, because I think it's a pretty human quality, like a pretty human potential. But for me, the stories of Buddhism, some of the practices, some of the stories are the things that turn the wheels for me, that make change happen. And the religion that I grew up with, which was Protestant Christianity, kept reminding me that I was evil and I needed to be saved by something outside of myself. Buddhism, Buddhism reminded me that I had a lot of mixture of things inside of me, and I could choose which ones to nurture, which seeds to water. So I was choosing to water the seed. I had to choose to water the seeds of understanding, forgiveness, non-disparaging, the things that the goodness, to water the seeds of goodness in myself and others. And these are things that I was always able to do when I was a child, in being in the woods, sitting by a creek, or going up to the mountains when I was in my 20s, working in a garden with soil and plants. So that's why and when I would get discouraged writing parts of the book and think, well, who am I to do this? This is just bad stuff. I could always read the parts. I would reread the parts that I had written about the earth, and they always made me feel better. I don't know if this sounds too scary for you to read, but I bet later on we'll find out that you've had experiences of the same kind. Does that answer your question enough, Phoenix?
Yes, my heart is full right now.
What do you think of that?
Life is hard.
Yes.
Right? Life is hard. And, for millennia, people have found comfort in the earth. They found comfort by sitting by the waters to get through the hard times. They found comfort by smelling lavender when things feel bad. They found comfort in planting in the garden and in walking mountains when things were hard. And so it's just reminding me that how much we need the earth. And as Ty said, I watched a video of Ty recently. The earth is more than the environment. We are the earth. So that when the hard things from life come up, and like reading the truth around what the colonizers, some who were part of your ancestry, did to the people that were already here and to the land, we can still turn to the earth for that same kind of comfort. So that comes up for me. And then also how you say, having a strong spiritual practice is key. Is key, right? That gave you the inner strength to continue to move forward and to continue to be able to explore. And I have found that in my life, on my own journey and hard things that I've had to face, that I can lean on my spiritual practice. And I have found that from people like Ty, who went through so much war and pain and lost so many people in his family, yet still walked a path of peace and spread it all over the world, that those of us who don't even call ourselves Buddhists know his name and can touch his spirit in that way for a sense of peace and guidance. And so, I'm just really grateful for your wisdom and your courage,
Well, I want to say that I'm really grateful for the Alliance for Ecotherapy and Social Justice, because that there even is something called ecotherapy is very beautiful to me. It's like, oh, this should have been known for a long time, and it wasn't. And then that it could be that it sort of got started with a somewhat with a bit of a colonizing perspective, so that with the social justice element and the liberation ecotherapy that you're bringing to it, you are bringing us back to being able to understand our relationship with the earth in its true colors. And I have to say, also, I would never have been able to write this book if it hadn't been for my indigenous African and Asian teachers and indigenous from Turtle Island as well. I mean, looking around for earth-centered wisdom, I was really lucky to find Mali Doma Some's book, The Healing Wisdom of Africa, where he says over and over again, he says, once our ancestors pass, they become aware. They know perfectly well what harm they did in their life. And they want to heal, but they can't. They want to heal the harm, they want to repair the harm, but they can't because they're deceased. They can't act anymore. They can act through us.
Yes.
But we have to reach back and say, we want to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
So that gave me a lot of confidence about working with my ancestors,
Mm-hmm.
because I had to write a book that did not, I would first only want to shout and get really angry and turn away from what I saw that their mindset was and their world was. But I knew that I had to be helping them heal. That was what the work was about, and that it was possible. Thich Nhat Hanh says similar things about healing what needs to be healed in our ancestors. And if we heal ourselves, we do heal our ancestors. So it seems like every culture in the world has this understanding, but it's not part of mainstream American culture or European culture.
Well, white supremacy, the culture of white supremacy is to forget and to be in denial. To forget.
Yeah.
And is to be silent. It's to be silent and to be in denial. And so when we speak out, we're beginning to free ourselves from that culture of white supremacy and to heal,
Yeah.
Like we were talking before we started about, my mother's birthday was yesterday. My mother passed 3 years ago. And Louise and I were chatting because I said, my mother had 5 children. She did not have any formal Western education. I'm the first person in my family to go to college. And my mother was 83, around the age range of Louise. And I was just thinking about, and I dreamt about my mother before tonight. And I was thinking like what she must be thinking, like that I am having this conversation with this white, middle class, very educated, highly educated white woman talking about her ancestors who were colonizers and enslavers. Like my mom, it would blow her mind. She'd be like, what? She could never imagine that, ever. My mother did not have white friends. She didn't have white friends. And so, we were talking about like maybe our mothers in the ancestral realm can talk to each other, and how I know that I would not have been able to hold the space for this dialogue 5 years ago. It would have been too much for me. I would have had too much anger. It's through the healing work that I've done and work with my ancestors, because there's silence in my lineage too, that has allowed me to hold the space here with you and build this friendship with you. And so this is like our mothers are here with us, When they were on Earth, they would have never ever crossed paths. You know, I grew up in the South. You grew up in California, so this is really this is the healing, walking into the conversations and having the conversation. So, you know, it's powerful. I'm full of love, full of love. I'm going to go to another question. Is that okay, Louise?
That's fine. That's
okay.
good.
So let me see here.
Phoenix is a wonderful person to have a conversation with. Let me tell you.
Oh, I know. This is a good
I wish
question.
you all this joy. This is really.
So I remember, and AJ was actually with us at this time. We were on a hike in Point Reyes, and we were at the writing retreat. And I remember we were on the hike, and if you've never been to Point Reyes in California, Northern California, you have to go. It's one of the most beautiful places, I think, in the world. I'm just going to say that. And we were walking, we were walking on the trail, and Louise knew all the plants. She was like, "Oh, Phoenix, this is what this is, and this is what this is." And I had never been around someone like that before that had that deep knowledge of the land like that. I was so impressed, and it made the hike so much more enjoyable. And then I do remember another story that you said that one time, I think you were with your father, and you used to be able during those times, you could just walk from place to place. People that weren't like owning, you could walk through someone's farm to get to the ocean or something, right? And that maybe, if I'm remembering correctly, you were like on the ocean with your father, or you were going there and you saw a whale. And you were just telling all these stories, and my mind was like blown. I was just listening, and I was like, oh my God, well, this is such a beautiful day. And so your book talks about listening to the land. So it's clear you know how to listen to the land. Can you tell us about what is listening to the land? How do you do that? What is that like for you? What do you hear?
Oh gosh. Oh, this is so lovely to have you remember that story.
I do remember it.
Beautiful. And all those plants along the coast there, they all have something. They're used to living in dry but salty, in a dry climate but salty, moist air, and they have these great fragrances in the leaves. Everything smells musky, really interesting. And I remember like rubbing the leaves and smelling them. Yeah. Oh, how did I came up with that phrase, listening to the land. After doing it all, I never thought of it that way while I was doing it. But for years, I'm surrounded in my study here by notebooks with going back many decades, because every time I would get to go to this place, I would write my experiences there. And I had this mother who I wrote a chapter about in the book, who was very botanically minded, and she knew the Latin names, the colonizer names of all the plants. But she also would love to just lie down on her belly and see what was crawling around and just breathe. My father kind of did that, like that kind of thing too. I mean, that was kind of unusual, I think. So I guess I grew up liking to learn facts about things, which is more what the colonizer mind would do, but also just liking to feel them, smell them, be with them, see what my body felt like. And when I was a writing teacher for so many years, and so we're trying to get away from abstractions and use unusual words that come out of our sensory experience.
Right.
And that might have been part of it too. I'm not sure where I came up with that, Phoenix, but I did, it has always been a part of my life, I think. And um, I have another indigenous teacher. Maybe somebody knew this man. His name is Arkan Lushwala. He's from Peru. And this book is called Deer and Thunder. I think I'm glad it's a well-made book because I've read it about 5 times. And I keep it near my bed and open it up at night if I can't sleep and read about some aspect of Peruvian cosmology, pre-colonial cosmology, how they believed the world worked. And a lot of it, he's full of very wise things. He's writing another book right now, and I haven't heard from him for a while, but he's telling us that in this time of climate uncertainty, that's not the right word, climate chaos, climate destruction, climate collapse is good, but he says it's not really collapsing, it's just making changes that are part of the way things are evolving, but humans can't understand them. So he's encouraging us to listen to the land. So then I got this very sort of high-powered meaning of listening. It's not just me lying on my belly listening to the ants crawling around. It's if you can really be in close touch with what the trees are saying, what the wind is saying, you have a chance of reprogramming for the new directions that are coming. So I like this teaching. It's very positive, and whatever is in the offing for us, as far as the changes to the collapse and changes to the climate are concerned, we have to pay attention to what the earth is saying, and we can do that.
Yeah.
I picked a persimmon off the tree in my yard today. It was as ripe as a persimmon used to be in November. It was needed to come off the tree. That's listening to the land, I think. And I recommend Archon to anybody that likes my book and wants to go to a deeper source.
You know, I really appreciate, you know, how you shared sort of your, you know, like what you learned from your mother and like being on the, you know, lying on the belly on the earth, and that this is something, and listening to the land is something that we all can do. You know, I have found that sometimes people are so full of guilt, especially I have found with white people, that sometimes that they feel like they can't even hear or do, you know, that is just the purview of indigenous people to be able to have a conversation with the land in that way, in a way of sacredness. And it's all of us have that ability, just open ourselves up to it. Like, you know, I communicate with, you know, in my tradition, all aspects of nature is known as a deity, and they have names. So, you know, the ocean water is Yemaya, the fresh water is Oshun, the mountain is Obatala. You know, it's like I have all these names, and it was through that I was able to grow my ecological consciousness per se, right? When the power of, like, for me, the naming, and that was connected to the sacredness. But I just appreciate, you know, the listening is what is needed, like for all of us to practice that humility, that cultural humility, but that is something that we all can do no matter our ancestral history, right? no
Yes.
matter our ancestral history. So I want to ask you, so with your deep knowledge of the land and uncovering all of these things that were hard to uncover around your lineage, how do you make peace with that? Like, how do you make peace with that? I mean, and you have your spiritual, just talk to us about it. How do you make peace with that? The knowledge that you have of what you know that your ancestors knew, and the violence, and like, how do you make peace with that in your own heart?
Mm. Oh. It's hard to answer this question, but I guess nobody would be very interested if I had a glib answer, because
Right.
this is a big question.
Yeah.
Let me just think about this for a minute. Could we have a breathe? Could we have a breathe?
Breathe together, yes, yes. We
Because everybody has to deal
put the
with
water
just
on
breathe.
Chandler,
Let's put the water on for a minute.
and so we're gonna
That.
breathe together.
Hmm. I'm ready to give it a try.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. This wasn't what I thought of during the water, but what comes to me now is the one of the sayings of my Buddhist teacher that I kept coming back to. Every time we can produce a moment of joy, there's healing going on. I'm not sure I could point to exactly where he says that, but it's this moment of joy. How can you find the moment of joy that takes you beyond guilt and shame and ugliness and even complicity in genocide? Of course, it helps that I found this idea from Molly Doma that they want to be healed. They want to change. And I began to see, as I looked into my own ancestors, I began to see pieces of change in my mother. My mother grew up in the South. She might have seen your mother. She might have. She was in Tennessee, but she married my father and became a Westerner, and sort of when I was growing up in the 40s and 50s, she was the only white mother I knew, the only woman I knew who, if she heard the N word, which we heard around here all the time in those days, she would stop the person and say something. So that did not change the colonizer mind, or there's plenty of other stuff she was still involved with, but there was that modeling that. I began to find things I could love about my ancestors as I got to know about their lives. Even the ones that said the worst things or did were the most what's the word, under the sway of the manifest destiny idea, white supremacy idea of the 19th century. So I could find human things that I could appreciate about them. So those things were helpful too.
Mm.
And it is one of the qualities that comes up again in Buddhism. This did I mention him? There's somebody called the never disparaging bodhisattva. He or she or they go around telling everybody they meet, you're wonderful. You have the potential to be a Buddha. You're just a wonderful person. Well, most people didn't believe him and got angry, and some people threw rocks at him for saying this or thought he was mocking them. But that was what he did. And that's another model that Buddhism can hold up. And it's something we all have that possibility in ourselves. And it's something that I think, as I've been thinking about it, as a child, I was a little bit like that. I would get angry with my mother if she said something disparaging about somebody's friend or something like that. So maybe that was part of what helped me. I don't know, but I do know that we don't need to be stuck in what our ancestors did. We can do differently. And as Phoenix knows, and I don't think I want to go into the details of this quite yet. Maybe I'll live to write another book about it, but the beautiful land that I wrote about is no longer, I'm no longer in any way an owner of that land. My family we had some deaths in the family, and just this past year we've passed that along to new ownership. And it was terrifying to me at first. This is too long a story to go into. I don't think I want to go into this. But my first effort was to find ways to turn it over to a nonprofit or other organization that could make it available to the original people, the first people of that land. And I end up making some wonderful friends among those people.
The WAPO?
The WAPO, or that was not the word that they really wanted to be called. That was a word, a mispronunciation of a Spanish word that was applied to them. And I think I'm learning now that I've written the book that they would prefer to be called the Mishual Honostatis. But there are only a few left, and they don't live even in Napa County anymore. I had a very wonderful experience with them. I have been building relationship, and it has been very affirming. That's what I'll say right now. It's been very affirming. I gave copies of my book to 3 Nishuel Onastatis people a couple of weeks ago, and they thanked me and hugged me in spite of COVID. And I was really grateful. And it's not that I have the answers in the book, but it's just that we reached out, we began to build relationship. So that's one thing.
Right.
And the other thing is having for the first time in my life had to receive payment for this land. I now have some money that I can spend for helping these people to build the kind of community that they need. So that will allow them to hold on to land and take care of it in the way that they want. So there's a lot to the answer. And this is part of I think the transformation of the karma of white supremacy and racism. And it's all still tangled up. I can't say that you'll read the book and you'll find it all sorted out and neatly arranged. It's still, I think it was Resma Menakem who said that we carry this stuff in our bodies.
Yeah.
And it takes, I think he said it will take 500 years to get rid of it. So I'm not pretending to be rid of it.
Right.
I have a lot of it in me, and I just have to keep practicing.
Right. Just have to keep practicing. What a beautiful thing to say.
You know, you have more questions, but I am also looking at the faces here in this circle of squares and thinking that probably people here have some.
Want to open it up to questions? Yeah. If anyone has a question or a comment, come off mute and please share. AJ.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good to be with you tonight. And Louise, thank you so much for this book. And I've been with you over the years as it's come into being. And I'm just so grateful for your hard work, your deep looking, your love. I feel the love in the book, the love of the land, and kind of learning to love ancestors that maybe at first glance feel unlovable. And I think that's kind of where some of my deepest pain is I've been doing genealogical research and learning more about my ancestors. And so even just in the last 6 months, I found more ancestors that were enslavers now in South Carolina. And yeah, it just feels like such a awful legacy to have inherited. And I wonder if you could say, I heard you say about the ancestors want to heal, but I'm wondering, could you say more about, your own process around reaching back to your ancestors for your own healing and their healing? Like, were there practices that you did? Yeah, just one of the things that struck me so much about the book, and where I could see the fruits of the Plum Village practice in the book, was this kind of non-duality. Like, you didn't shame or push away those ancestors. You kind of felt like you kind of brought them along with you. on this journey. So I don't know if you could reflect a little more on that. Thank you so much. I'm going to bow out.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you, AJ. And yes, AJ's story has been inspiring to me also. So someday we get to hear that one. Something that occurred to me as you were speaking, and I should have included it earlier, that I also, another practice that I have, it does feel awful dealing with this burden of my ancestors, but I have to say a lot of what I do is reading books and accounts and hearing stories of what happened to the people from the people who were harmed. Those stories, you can't compare them. And one of the things I liked that I discovered was an indigenous psychologist, Eduardo Duran, has written some wonderful books about what he and his research partner, Bonnie Duran, learned was called by many indigenous people the soul wound. The soul wound. It's the wound to the soul that comes from colonization, and it affects both the colonized and the enslaved. I would expand it to, and the enslaver and the colonizer, but in different ways, and we have to heal in different ways. So I guess I want to say that paying attention to the stories of the colonized and the enslaved has been a big part of my journey. And continuing to, I'm not trying to compare these two stories, but I want to acknowledge the extreme pain and grief from that the other parties have experienced, and not just the Europeans. So that was one thing. I don't know how I don't know how I managed to look at my ancestors with non-duality. I just kept trying because I knew I had to. I knew that was the only way to do it. I knew that, and there's something else I think fits in here, but I'm not sure how. So let me just try. I mentioned that I mentioned these three. Yes, I did I'm sorry, getting confused. I giving too many talks and getting them mixed up. But I think I did mention to you all that I had recently met three members of the Mishual Onasatis people, two of whom I had known pretty well already and had built a relationship with. But what happened was, this is amazing. And I think this is an answer to your question in a way. What happened was the Land Trust of Napa County, which is a conservation organization set up to help people conserve plant species, and completely unaware of all the culture that needs to be conserved. But that group is going through some education and changes, and they offered a hike about a month ago called a walk with Napa, a walk with, I want to say Napa's land ancestors, because that's what we call them in Thich Nhat Hanh practice, but it was called a walk, I have to look at it. A walk with Napa's first people. a walk with Napa's First People. It was the second time it had been offered, but where there was a hike and they were touching the medicinal plants and releasing the fragrances and going to the river and singing a song to the salmon to recall the salmon and teaching us about using the in obsidian and other local products to make jewelry and baskets. And then they served us foods from the land that I had never tasted before. I had tasted pine nuts, but these were special pine nuts from the pine trees that grow there. And I had never tasted roasted bay nuts, which were really delicious. And I had never tasted cider made from manzanita berries and the juice of elderberries. And they served all these things and they talked to us for 3 hours in the most loving. And they didn't shy away from speaking about what happened to them. And one of them has a job following bulldozers around, looking to see if any remains are being turned up in all the development that's happening in Napa Valley right now. She told us about that. So, I mean, it wasn't like we were just looking, it was not a Pollyanna occasion. We were not just looking at good things. It was a true sensory gift of sharing with us what their world was like and is like. And I guess I figure if they can heal enough to do that, I can damn well do what it takes to take care of my ancestors. You know, so that's my answer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I see someone else has their hand up, Elise and Pamela.
Hi, it's Elise.
Hi, Elise.
Hi, Louise. It's just great to hear you. I just love hearing your voice and your energy and your wisdom. I just love it.
Well, that's nice. Thank you.
What came up for me when Phoenix asked you about how you process and heal, and we had the water break, which was just lovely. What popped right into my head was, well, it's not over. We're still doing it. And white supremacy is still very present with us. And so I think healing that colonizer in any of us who have it, which, is a lot of us, because we're raised in this culture, those of us who are raised in this culture. It's very hard to get away from it. It's very hard not to have it. So what I've been doing is I'm really working to replace that mindset with another mindset. And I do love the indigenous philosophies. And so I don't know if you know Robin Kimmerer, you probably do, Braiding Sweetgrass. She has an audio version of Braiding Sweetgrass that she reads. And I have it in my car and I listen to it over and over and over again. Because I'm in the car and I'm with her and I'm like, yeah, she's my friend. I love this stuff. I'm getting it. I get out of the car. I'm back in Western culture and it fades. It goes away. I'm back with the old mindset, the old energies. And then I, come back to the car. There she is again. I mean, it's taking a lot. I've gone through it. I don't know. I think I'm on my third run through right now I just put them in, it ends, I start over again. It ends, I start over again. Because it's Western culture is so ingrained in us. It's so difficult to get out of that colonizer mindset. It's everywhere. So I think what you're saying about seeking out and listening both to the land, of course, and listening to Indigenous people and listening to African Americans, listening to that wisdom that is so out there. You can find it. It's there. There's so many resources that we have available right now. So much more so than even a few years back. I mean, there's so much availability. So that's what just occurred to me is healing, really healing the colonizer in me is going to help, heal the past generations of what my ancestors most likely did. I don't know any actual factual stuff, but I'm assuming that it was not good. So
yeah,
that's I guess that's where I'm starting at this point to
beautiful,
really work on that. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mm.
You know, and as a descendant of people that were enslaved and also were victims of genocide, the colonizer lives in me too. It just looks differently and manifests in different ways. And the work that I've had to do around the healing of my ancestors, you know, Dr. Joy DeGruy talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome, is around, not necessarily around what my ancestors did to other people, but what my ancestors did to each other that created dysfunction and toxicity within the family that I have had to transform my character and my behavior so that I don't repeat those dysfunctional behaviors. That's how post-traumatic slave syndrome, which is a result of colonization and created these certain ways of being in relationship. That's what I inherited from my ancestors, right? And so, and also because I practice a religion where we have an active ancestral practice, meaning I do ceremony every day. I pray to my ancestors every day. You know, we do big ceremonies, small. It's like, it's not just October for me, it's all the time. I dream, I have a vivid dream life. My mother comes to me in my dreams. I hear them, I see them. Is that I have had to spend many decades of really healing those dysfunctional patterns that I inherited. That's how the trauma came into, you know, as a descendant of Africans that were enslaved and of Native people that were victims of genocide and of the white enslaver, right? When I did my mother's DNA, I had a lot more white Western European in me than I thought. A high percentage on my maternal lineage, right? And so I've also been dealing with that. How do I make peace myself with the white ancestors that are in me, you know, and the ways that they became my ancestors, probably through rape, honestly, right? So we all have, we all have the colonizer in us. You know, I appreciate what you were saying, Elise. And our work is just depending on where we land on the colonizer ladder, we all have it. So I see Michelle, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Phoenix. Thank you, Louise. Thanks for everyone who's circled up here and all the unseen ones and all the lands and waters holding us. Thank you, Louise, especially for one way of decolonizing that you're lifting up today. That's a big part of your practice, as I'm hearing it, is bearing witness and telling the truth. That feels like brave and critical part of cultural repair. And I'm really feeling grateful for how much more ancestor tending is coming into the conversation. And I am getting around to a question. Just want to do some acknowledging. and maybe at the end in the chat offer some resources that have been really helpful to me around ancestral healing and also being really engaged in eco-social repair. I guess two things. One thing I want to bring forward to piggyback off of what you just shared, Phoenix, to really, I think, core piece of wisdom, which is that most of us are carrying internalized oppressor patterns, internal colonizer mind, and as well as internalized inferiority and oppressed patterns. And that's all of, that's our individual healing work. And some of that work happens better in groups and where there's a lot of holding and witness and often a ceremony container and a bigger spirit and spirits holding. So I really love that that's come in. And I would love for both of you to pick up and speak from experience or wisdom or just off the cuff about the following, which is a conundrum that I have in my journey. I'm a first generation Californian and second generation American. I'm a descendant of Eastern European heritage and also Lebanese Jewish people. My people came here from the Ukraine, first to Chicago and then to Northern California. And I grew up very connected to the land, and I feel like I've been on a journey since childhood. So 60 years of learning how to be a good guest here because of love of the land and also just a sense of reciprocity. Oh my God, this place welcomed my people who were asylum seeking refugees. I'm really left with fleeing pogroms and death, violence. And so I feel like, oh my God, so grateful. How do I love back? And it, took many decades to figure out how to be in active relationship with living descendants of first Californians who are here. And so one question I'm holding is, if either of you or both of you, whoever wants to speak to the tension between doing inner decolonizing work, coming deeply into relationship with the land, becoming eco-literate, learning how to do cultural tending of the land, and doing ancestor practice and earth-based ceremony and deep grief work. There's that inner work. But then for me, and maybe this comes out of my cultural tradition, my feeling is I can't clear ancestral karma. I can't, at the center of indigenized mind is everyone is kin and everything is relationship. And I feel a huge sense of responsibility to be actively engaged in reparations, whether that's habitat restoration or being in partnership with tribal leadership of place around what do you need and how do I get behind it? Whether it's land trust, other rematriation or land back movement, rights of nature movement, particular other tribal, the amount of misogyny and rape and kidnapping of almost all on Turtle Island in Indigenous girls and women is a huge thing. All communities of color were disproportionately hit during COVID, in particular in res life. Reservations just had this especially in the Southwest, so that isn't of my place, but I feel like this sense of like, I can't do only my inner work. That feels like a very privileged space. And it doesn't allow me to get out of whiteness if I am not actively in relationship and asking like, what do you need now? And how can we do it now? Right here where I live, we're in a big project supporting Coast Miwok to confront the Catholic Church for reparations from the mission period. And in particular nearby, an entire pavement and school, a private Catholic college was built on sacred burial ground. We have found many, many bones and shell mounds. And so I'm just leaning into like, what do you need? How can I be of support? And I just wonder if either of you can talk to that dance between inner healing and inner shifts of consciousness and coming back into a different spirit mind and indigenized relational mind, the dance between that and doing like the real outer work with the relational repair and cultural repair and activist work. That was a lot of words. Thanks for hearing me feeling really grateful for this invitation and this conversation, and this deep healing ceremony we're in together. Thank you.
Thank you. Louise, go ahead.
I'm wondering if if this is a time for a short experience with the water,
Okay.
because this is a deep
Breathe.
question.
Yes, let's breathe.
And I'm sure everyone has answers. I can give a short answer.
Go ahead, Louise.
Both. And it is a dance. Everyone does the dance differently. And when you get older, it's harder to do both. It's especially harder to do the activist part. So
You know, I am, you know, there's this saying that without darkness, there would be no light. Right? If there was not darkness, we could not see the light. And it's life. Right? So the both also is, you know, I was listening to the water when Louise was very right on point and said, boom, play the water, let's listen. And what I heard was we have to learn to flow, right? So you flow depending upon what season you are in your life, right? You flow in and out of the currents of the river of life. And so, as Louise said, as you get older, it can be more difficult to do the more fire-based activist work. But to me, what she is doing right here is activist work, sitting in circle with us on Zoom, sharing her story, all the work she did, the research, the writing. That is active work. And so we flow like the water, depending upon what season we are in. I've been in a season of deep grief, you know, for losing my mother, and then my best friend, and then my other friend, and then my other friend, and then my cousin. As you talked about, Michelle, COVID, you know, has decimated many communities of color and indigenous communities. Indigenous communities have the highest rate of poverty still in the United States, more than Black people. Indigenous communities have less access to clean water still in the United States today, 2022, right? It's still present. And so, you know, my invitation is we need everyone to be in the river together around this. And you flow in and out in ways that you are guided to flow in, right? Like the water. Because, you know, we know that the water is so strong that water can break down a rock, right? Water is powerful, right? And when the water is still, we can see the reflection of ourselves. It's a mirror for us. So like, that's just what, you know, when Louise had the wisdom to say, play the water, I just said, well, let me breathe into this. And that's what I heard, Michelle, was that you flow, like the dance that Louise said, like the dance that you said, the tension, flow with it. But it's important for all of us to get in the water, to get into the stream of life. Like, what are we being called? Whether or not you have a practice with your ancestors, you don't even have to believe in any kind of powers or anything, right? If you are paying attention and listening and seeing what's happening on the earth right now, then you have to be activated in some way. You just get in the flow where you fit in. I find with white people, I've just got to say this again, that there still is this thing around either I'm not doing enough or I can't deal with it at all. Give me the answer, give me the answer. And that's still searching outside of us, outside of yourselves, right? Give me the answer, Louise, the elder. I'm not saying this, that you did this, Michelle. I'm using it as an example. Give me the answer, Louise, as an 80-something-year-old elder. Give me the answer, Phoenix, as a Black, you know, queer person. Give me the answer, Native chief. Give me the answer, you know, Indigenous chief. Give me the answer. That is still white supremacy culture where we're looking outside of ourselves, right? Right? And we all have the ability, as Louise said earlier, to listen to the land. We don't have to have any indigenous blood in us to be able to hear, to be able to see what is happening with the waters and the mountains, and that what is happening with the water is happening to us. If all the water is toxic and killing the fish, like Lake Merritt, I've been, you know, I left Oakland, but I know Lake Merritt, the Central Lake in Oakland, all these fish were just dead. What does that say about the people of Oakland? People of Oakland are hurting too, right? So that's what came to me, is like when the water was playing, it's like just, it's a flow, and you flow in and out in different ways depending upon what season you are in your life. And I'm just grateful, you know, that you're here, Michelle, and that you're bringing your spirit here. And that everyone that's here, you didn't have to come and be on Zoom for another 2 hours. You made a decision. You chose to come and be part of the dialogue. So you're doing the work. We give thanks.
Yeah.
We give thanks for you.
We do.
So it's 8:15. And so we have time for one more question, and then we want to just share some things. Thank you, Michelle, shared some things in the chat. We want to share, Chandler, if you can go ahead and put the link to Louise's book in the chat. And there's a discount code that if you are able to buy her book, and with the code, you can get a 20% discount on the book and free shipping, I think. So we're going to put the link to purchase the book in the chat. I highly recommend that you all buy the book. You know, we're going to be using parts of her book in my liberation ecotherapy work that I'm doing as like a text book, as we talk about cultural humility. So we're going to be using that with the students that I'm working with and people that come through our liberation ecotherapy certification program. And then we also want to share a brief evaluation link. You know, the Alliance, we've been around just 2 years. I want to acknowledge Ellen Morrison, who's part of our advisory council. Thank you for coming, Ellen. You know, it's basically me in an advisory council of people, and we've just been doing things like this. We have these dialogues, and because, you know, when you're bringing together social justice with ecotherapy and earth healing, you got to talk about things like this, right? You have to talk about it, because if you're really connecting with the earth, you go far enough, you're going to hit colonization, you're going to hit slavery, you're going to hit genocide, right? You're going to hit raping of women and children, right? You're going to hit it all, because it's all part of the earth. And so is there a way that we can do this where we can have honest dialogue in a sacred way that's not about blaming each other or even our government, but taking responsibility for our little part of the river, right? So I really would like your feedback just on how we did this event. We tried some new things. We appreciate that. And thank you for those of you that gave a donation. We really appreciate it. We know you didn't have to. We know that inflation is out of control. We appreciate you. And if you want to send the donation link to other people or donate more, we'd appreciate you. I work a full-time public health job with the CDC of all places, and I do this as well. So I've been doing this in kind for a while, and I can't stop because it's my passion. I think about it all the time. So this is, but I'm not able to devote a full-time effort to it because I have to pay my bills, and it doesn't pay the bills yet. We're working on that. But this is something I've been doing, you know, in addition to my full-time work, because as you can see, it's a passion. And ecotherapy taught me about, you know, like, I'm a Black queer person. I've been involved in social justice work. I'm a social worker for 30 years, but it wasn't until ecotherapy that I started to go deeper into Indigenous history that I did not know. That I didn't know. Ecotherapy brought me there, where I would learn and read, you know, my favorite Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, you know, like, we're not settler colonialism, white supremacy, and the history of erasure and exclusion, things that I did not know. Ecotherapy brought me to, I never heard of settler colonialism before, you know, and it was my Indigenous neighbors in San Leandro and East Bay. They've just always been so generous in teaching me. I had a lot to learn myself, right? And so I'm grateful to people like Linda Bazell, who was an elder in the field of ecotherapy and has done a lot of writing and teaching and introducing ecotherapy in a way, and her eco-feminist, she may not call herself that, but I call her that in some way, her eco-feminist perspective that she brings, and, you know, and trying to help the people that get deeper with ecotherapy as well. So I'm grateful for elders like Linda Bazell as well, and my relationship with Louise, that has helped, that I'm learning from you too, right? It's mutual.
Thank goodness we are coming together. I am very grateful for this. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So does anyone, it's 8:20, we're ending in 10 minutes. Does anyone have anything they want to say or ask Louise before we? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm very grateful. It's very beautiful to hear all of you. I just met a friend this afternoon, and she had the 2 copies of your book, and she said, take one. And I just took it, and I was like enchanted with it. And then later she told me that there was a talk, and I think it's very beautiful what all of you said. And I think that's important for us to continue to explore and reflect and inquire of who we really are. And I'm from Brazil. I'm a light-skinned woman from Brazil. And my grandfather was a Black man, and my great-grandmother, an indigenous person, full-blood Brazilian. And still, I'm seeing in a certain way. And like yesterday, I went to Kaiser, and the guy asked me, who you identify with? And he said, white, Hispanic, Black. And he said something else. I said, none. And then I said, I'm from Brazil, I'm multiracial. And then he said, okay. And when I got the results today of my exams, it was written, the description, this woman, a white woman, Caucasian. And I was like, wait a second, this is very colonized, detailed perspective of in not respecting who someone is. Here I am decolonizing my mind, working with being part of the, having the 2 having different ancestors in my history and claiming of those who were invisible in my life, because my grandfather and my grandmother were very invisible. And yeah, and I think that it's very important to continue to be with who we are and decide who we are. And I think it's very important to give support, like many of you are. There was an election in Brazil last weekend, and the first time two Native women were elected. And we gave all the support, and it's very powerful and very beautiful. And we need the voices there. So thank you. I really appreciate it. And I love the sound of the water. And I think it's a very good thing to use when we are teaching. I teach at New York Inside meditation, and it just gave me an idea. Oh, I'm going to teach a day before Thanksgiving. And I loved it. I said, that's what I'm going to talk about. That's my Dharma talk. And I'm going to put the sound of nature there and see what we're hearing. And so that's very beautiful. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing. We really appreciate hearing your voice and seeing your face and hearing your story so much. And, when we were planning this, I was like, we have to create sacred space. We have to play nature sounds, especially water, because things become heavy and intense, and to help us just really be able to breathe through this. Louise, do you want to say something?
Well, I would like to just throw in that it's a very remarkable day, October 6th. We're just about to come to Indigenous Peoples Day. I happen to know that in Sonoma County, next over from Napa County, there's a group that's been meeting for, I think it's 3 years, of settlers on the land. And they've been trying to build relationship in a respectful way, learn how to make repair as they can. And they have come up with an apology, which they are reading on October 10th. So this is happening. I heard about an apology from Quakers in Alaska for the schools that the Quakers sent Indigenous people, ran for Indigenous people there. And I think that these are just two little things. There's a big gathering happening of people like us who have been meeting again for several years. There's a big happening called Jubilee for Justice happening on a plantation in Louisiana right now. Some people who couldn't come to this are there. So I feel like even though the world looks pretty grim in so many ways, that whatever dance we're doing between the inner work and the outer work is beginning to be very productive. And I don't think I would be alive at 84 if I weren't in this dance. I feel like this is what life is about right now for me. So let's thank you very much to Ecotherapy for Social Justice, because this feels like a home base for this work. I'm really grateful for the crowd that was here today, whom I still don't know where you all are from, and I would love to know that. But I know your faces, and I know your little black box with your initials and names on it. So
why don't we do that so Louise can know who we are. As our final prayer, say your name and where you're located. If you know the Indigenous land, great. If not, it's okay. And just one word is our final prayer. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to call your name because I see you on the screen. I see your names, okay? So I will start with Chandler.
Hello, my name's Chandler, pronoun she, they. I am on the lands of the Lenape people in Brooklyn, New York, and my home, my heart is in the lands of the Cherokee Muscogee Creek people in Georgia.
Oh,
What, do you have a one word you want to say in the prayer, Chandler, that you want to offer?
Yes, gratitude, deep gratitude.
Thank you. Michelle, Gaston Coast Miwok.
Yeah, particularly in the Tamalpais watershed. Torn between two words. I'll just reweaving.
Thank you.
beautiful.
And Judith Morse.
That is two words.
Yeah.
It means two different things.
I'm Judith Morse. I'm in Cambridge, Massachusetts, on the land of the Massachusetts. And my word is, it's more than one word, gratitude for conversation like this.
Thank you for coming, Judith. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Then I see Elise, and is that Pamela with you?
I live on the Ohlone land in Oakland. I look forward to learning the full name. Hopeful.
Thank you.
And I'm Elise. I'm in Berkeley on Ohlone land. And my word is reciprocity.
Thank you. And Mr. Mark Fielding.
Hi. So I'm now living in Salt Spring Island, which is on Salish People's Land in British Columbia. For the last 40 years, I lived in Aotearoa, latterly on the Ngāti Maru lands of the Maori people in the North Island. My long backstory is to the Pictish people of Northern Britain. And my word is circularity.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. Linda Bazell.
Hi, I'm living on Chumash land in Santa Barbara, California. And the word that came to me was peace.
Peace. Thank you, Linda. Ellen Morrison.
Hey there, Louise. Phoenix. Resourcing is the word for me today, and I am on the stolen land of the Louise John Ohlone, also known as Berkeley.
Thank you. So glad you came. Thank you.
Me too.
AJ.
Hi again, AJ. I live in Richmond, Virginia, which is Powhatan land. And I think my word is kin.
Thank you. And then I see Wildesy. Am I saying your name correctly?
Correct. Some people call me Fatima.
Okay.
I came from Brazil, the land of the Carajás. It's where the state where Brasilia is, the center capital. And I live in between. At this moment, I'm in San Leandro, California, the Ohlone land. But I am in between those three places. I spend a lot of time in Brooklyn at Lenape land. And my word is Sada in Pali, which means faith. Faith, we need that.
Thank you so much. Then Mr. Steve Costa.
Mr. Costa had to leave.
Oh,
but
sorry.
I'm here.
Sorry.
I remained. My name's Kate Levinson, and I live on the Coast Miwok land in West Marin, and my word is spirit.
Thank you, Kate. Lisa.
Oh, my turn. Is it my turn?
Go ahead, Louise. Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Well, I think I've already said I'm on the Lishan Ohlone land. I pay the Shumi tax here and have done as much work as I can to help this organization grow and thrive as it is doing so beautifully right now. Many of us seem to be on their land. The word. Continuation.
Continuation. I see. Thank you. Lisa.
I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I feel a lot of gratitude for all the work that I'm hearing that is being done by many of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Shelley.
Hi, everybody. My name is Shelley, and I'm on the land of the Massachusetts and the Pawtucket people, also known as Boston now. And my word is reflection.
Thank you. Massachusetts is representing up in here tonight. I love it. And then the last person I see here is Kim Johnson. At least that's the name on the screen.
Yep, that's me.
Okay.
Hey, I'm in St. Augustine, Florida. It's a claim to fame being the oldest city in America. And sadly, I only really know about all of the many colonization stories of this land. Still learning. My word is energized.
Energized. Thank you for coming. We're all still learning, Kim. We're all still learning. So it's all good. It's all good. And so I want to just give thanks to everyone. Chandler, thank you for the tech and the Zoom so that I didn't have to think about that because I would have forgotten everything. I want to thank Louise for her book and for her wisdom and for her presence and her time and patience and love. I felt it so much. And I just want to thank all of you for being open to this kind. I've never had this kind of dialogue in a public forum before in this way. So I want to lift up Louise's ancestors. I want to lift up the indigenous ancestors. I want to lift up all of our ancestors and lift up all of us so that we can continue on to do the work and be in the river and the flow. So thank you all so much. Thank you. Have a wonderful night. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.